Well, despite what you hear, he's still in the running. Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul and his supporters aren't giving up on his delegate strategy. And it looks like that effort is paying off in the state of Nebraska. 1 week from today, Nebraska will be holding its convention. And if Paul nabs the state, it will be the 5th state whose delegation Paul controls. And according to Republican National Committee rules, securing 5 states means you can formally be nominated for president. And that guarantees him time to speak on the floor. So it's not over yet. But can he pull it off? And what would a win in Nebraska mean for Paul and his very loyal following? Well, to weigh in, Austin Peterson, director of Freedom Works, joins us now. Welcome, Austin.
Thank you.
So, contrary to popular belief, it's not a done deal, is it?
Well, not necessarily. You see, Paul has conceded that he won't likely be the Republican nominee, but that doesn't mean that there aren't small battles to be won along the way. You see, the Republican National Convention in Tampa will be a battle not necessarily for the nomination, but it'll be a battle to shape the platform. The platform is the national dialogue. It's what do Republicans care about? What do they agree on? What are the issues that they all say that we're all going to move forward on? So I think that the Ron Paul delegates who are going to be going to the Republican National Convention aren't necessarily going to be focused on winning the nomination outright, although it's not impossible. If he were to win a plurality of delegates, his name could still be put forward as a candidate. And if something were to happen to Mitt Romney between now and then, God forbid, then there is a chance that he could step up and take that role. But most likely what's happening right now is that Ron Paul's delegates across the nation that he's earned, about, I think, around 250 of them are working to influence the platform of the Republican National Convention, which is a very, very important step in bringing forward our ideas.
And discuss more the significance of that platform, just simply being allowed the platform to speak at this convention.
Right. Well, imagine what happened to Ron Paul and his supporters in 2008. Ron Paul himself was not even invited to the Republican convention in 2008. There was a shadow convention that occurred in the Twin City across the way. It was in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And across the way, Ron Paul's supporters, and about 10,000 of them, were sort of excommunicated from the RNC. They weren't invited, they weren't credentialed, and they weren't allowed to come out on the floor. Ron Paul himself was only allowed, I believe, one staff member to go for a temporary small amount of time. If Ron Paul is actually invited to the Republican National Convention this time in 2012, if he's actually given a speaking slot, then, well, first of all, it's not going to make the Republicans that happy, but it's going to show that his people are here, they're there to stay, and that they are a major, important power block within the GOP that they have to respect and whose issues that they have to pander to.
So his presence will be there, his supporters will be there, he'll be given a chance to speak, a chance to spread the ideas, and a chance to even kind of contrast with Mitt Romney.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if he was given a 15-minute slot to speak, you can be sure that he's not going to change his mind on the issues. So you would have this coronation ceremony that was, all, rah-rah Mitt Romney, and then all of a sudden you would have this sort of, Ron Paul moment where for 15 minutes you would hear about the ideas of liberty, you would hear about his concept about monetary policy, you would hear about his concepts about civil liberties. These are not the things that the GOP cares about necessarily, but they're things about that a small vocal minority of the population really does care about, and they are represented by Ron Paul. And I hope that these people are enfranchised, these delegates are enfranchised, because for that 15 minutes that he'll have, which is his last moments on the stage before he retires, those issues would be addressed and his people would be heard. And I think that it would go a long way in stemming a lot of the rage that has sort of been built up over this process from the Ron Paul delegates and people who have been disenfranchised by the process. People in Massachusetts, for example, who were forced to sign these illegal affidavits that they would be required to support Mitt Romney, even though it's impossible to sign an affidavit to do, or have a notary sign to do something in the future. I think it would go a long way to have Ron Paul just speak for 15 minutes to quell some of the anger that has gone on throughout this process.
And, Ron Paul has said before that it's not necessarily just about winning the presidency, that a lot of it is spreading this message that he has. So in a way, wouldn't this be a victory for him, being able to have that platform?
Sure, absolutely. But you've also got to look at not just the presidency. When he talks about the ideas, spreading the ideas, he's had candidates that he's endorsed winning winning their House and Senate primary races. You know, we have one very powerful senator right now. His name's Mike Lee. He's not even related to Ron Paul like his son Rand Paul is. Senator Mike Lee was not going to win his election until he was endorsed by Ron Paul, and all of a sudden the grassroots came out and helped Senator Mike Lee win his race. We now have a very powerful conservative libertarian-leaning senator in the Senate. We also have Ron Paul's son, Senator Rand Paul. We also have a freshman congressman from Michigan. His name's Justin Amash. He's the future Ron Paul, people say. There's Thomas Massey in Kentucky, who's running in his primary right now, who just won his primary, and he's looking to be the next libertarian-leaning Republican in the House. So you can't win the big prize necessarily all the time, and I think Ron knew that that wasn't necessarily going to happen, although we did our best, you know, Paul and his supporters. But we did win all of these little battles along the way. We took over these state parties, and we won all these delegations, and we won a Senate seat here, and we won a House seat there. And, you know, I'm 31 years old. If I live to be 60, and we double our take that we do over the next 4 to 5 years, and we keep doubling it and we keep doubling it, then we'll have a very strong power block in both the House and the Senate, through which we can have libertarian ideas heard throughout our lifetimes. So Ron Paul's movement is going to live beyond him. It doesn't matter what happens even at the Republican National Convention. Everybody knows that the platform doesn't even necessarily mean anything. But what does mean something is that we have these senators that have won. We have these freshman congressmen in here that have won. We have more people running for office, and we have this movement that started out as a tiny little nothing that was completely excommunicated, and now we have them taking over little seats of power here and there all over the United States. So I actually am very heartened. You know, it's sad to lose the big prize, but there's little prizes that have been won that we can sort of look to as our victory.
Well, all eyes are kind of now on Nebraska, you know, his supporters hoping that they can win over this state. And because of this, you know, we're seeing reports of increased security to kind of prepare for this Ron Paul insurgency, as they call it. What do you think about that? Just gearing up for the Ron Paul fanatics as they see it, and they're like, hey, we need to buckle down and get more security for the Ron Paul people.
Right. Well, I hope the security is there to take care of everybody, because it's been the Ron Paulites who have been assaulted all across the United States. Whenever there's been reports of violence, it's always been the Romney supporters who have thrown the beat down on our Ron Paul supporters. So I hope there is security there, because the last thing that I want to see is more violence done to our delegates, as there has been in the past. Now, a lot of people have been reporting that sort of Ron Paul is having his last stand in Nebraska, that if he doesn't get the delegation, the plurality of delegates in Nebraska, that would be his last stand. But I don't really understand that, because as I've understood it from the delegate numbers, there was Louisiana, Maine, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, and also Colorado, which Ron Paul had a plurality of delegates in. So as I understand it right now, Ron Paul does have a plurality of delegates, and several news outlets have reported legitimately that Ron Paul has enough delegates to have his name put into contention for the Republican nomination in Tampa, which means that he would be given a 15-minute speaking slot at the convention. So I don't know that the reports that Nebraska is his last stand are really that accurate, because they are forgetting the state of Colorado that he won the plurality of delegates in as well. No one seems to have mentioned that, but that has
That's
been
interesting.
reported.
Yeah, it seems to be that they're banking on the state of Nebraska to kind
Right.
of pull it
No,
off.
I don't believe so. As I understand it right now, there is already a plurality of delegates amongst 5 states that Paul has, enough to give him the nomination. But there were a lot of reports today that showed that as his last stand, which I don't believe is true.
And I don't want to bring up. I want to play this this clip of Ron Paul addressing some of the chaos that has transpired between you know, Mitt Romney and the establishment and the Ron Paul supporters in the past. Here's what he had to say about it.
You know, I want people to act dignified and not try to cause a ruckus and break down, you know, and disrupt things. But at the same time, I tell them, you don't have to get pushed around. If they're not following the rules, you have a right to stand up for the rules. And I think for the most part, these winning caucuses that we've been involved in, we have followed the rules, and the other side has at times not followed the rules.
So what do you think about that piece of advice there? He's like, you know what? If they're not following the rules, you should fight back.
You're darn right, because Ron Paul is a libertarian. He's not a pacifist. You know, there is a time when you do have to fight. And sometimes when you are being assaulted or if you are being cheated, you have to stand up for your rights and you have to make a little bit of a ruckus. Now, I don't want that to happen. I don't want any violence and I don't want anything to happen. But I mean, you know, there comes a time if somebody starts getting ready to, you know, draws their fist back when you've got to get ready. So, I mean, I don't think Paul is advocating violence there or saying that, you know, that's what he wants to happen. But, you know, for too long, these people have been disenfranchised. For too long, this message has been pushed to the side, and all of these people who have worked very hard for the last 4 years to push this campaign to the forefront are not going to just go home and not have their voices heard. So when Tampa comes up, when August comes up, it would be probably in Mitt Romney and the establishment's best interest for them to give him his 15 minutes to speak. It's the last, you know, it's his last hurrah. He's going to retire after this year, and I think there won't be any problems. But if they do push the Paulistas to the edge, I do worry a little bit about what might happen, because people who are pushed to the edge with a country that's $15 trillion in debt, you know, where we have the NDAA, where people are, you know, being threatened that they might be shipped off to Guantanamo Bay, even if they're American citizens, and they're stripped of their rights. Desperate people do desperate things. And I think that Ron Paul is acknowledging that there is a time to fight back. I don't know what's going to happen in Tampa because nobody really knows. There's a lot of chaos right now, and everybody's on the edge. I hope everybody just chills out and that everything's cool. But there is a time when you do have to say, listen, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm mad as hell, and it's time for me to fight back. So I hope that the Paulistas take a little bit of gumption and moxie, and they stand up for what's right, and they stand up for what they really believe in.
All right. Well, we will be keeping a close eye on the way things play out over there in Tennessee. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That was Austin Peterson. He is the director of FreedomWorks.